Carter Verhaeghe will get the bag. But what company is he in regard to goal scorers across the NHL? We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, August 9th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MonoMan12, follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more, as the playoffs have been done for over a month now, and the sports haven't sported like we've wanted them to. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. So Panther fans, grateful to be back here once again here on the show to once again celebrate the Summer of Champions here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. So a little bit of what's on the timeline for on the agenda, for today's show. We're going to discuss more about where the Panthers rank as far as front office confidence rankings. Barkov and Tkachuk have spoken out on wanting more and being greedy for more. We're going to discuss that in segment number 2. And Carter Verhaeghe, it's going to be an extended conversation based on the conversation we had on Winans Wednesday and continuing on today's edition of the show on what company he is in. And we're going to continue this conversation on today's show on a Friday, which means it is a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. And Nich Fairbanks is here joining me this time to talk about everything and all in the world of the Florida Panthers. So, Nich, welcome back to the show once again, my friend.
Thank you very much. And if you guys can see, 50% off all Stanley Cup apparel is finally come in. I'm very happy to be donning this right now. But it's great to be back, and a couple of interesting topics to definitely think about, going forward as the season's going to start, getting underway here in the next month or two, and then, what's might happen in the next off season.
Yeah, and special shout out to former host of the show, Josh Lick, for telling us about the 50% off, and that's where I started to spread the news about NHLshop.com and their 50% off. So I hope that you guys were able to get in on your merch there. But Nich, for the Panthers and the latest article from The Athletic talking about front office confidence rankings, and to no one's surprise, the Florida Panthers are first. Obviously, the one who came off a Stanley Cup is definitely going to have the confidence of a fan base, and especially because the core is still around for the Panthers, the majority and a lot of the pieces that they lost were more of the debt pieces for them. A lot of the 1-year deals reset with guys who they are on prove-it deals, like we talk about the Boquist brothers, Nate Schmidt, Thomas Nosek, AJ Greer, all that. Even though Greer's on a 2-year deal in the case of that for the Panthers. But and Dom Luszczyszyn spoke about it on the article, saying that no team in the NHL is managed better than them, and that they are the league's gold standard. And a little bit of context of what is on this list is there are some rebuilding teams who are on a rebuild, but their confidence in the front office's ability to turn their situation around, even if they're not at the top. So you have like the Utahs and the Montreals there, for example. But also where I wanted to get to take this conversation to in regards to that is the most recent Stanley Cup champions, even before the Panthers, like the Vegas Golden Knights, Colorado Avalanche, Tampa Bay Lightning, and to see kind of where they stand and to see what they've done most recently, and maybe like a little bit of a compare and contrast for them. And let's start a little bit back with the Pittsburgh Penguins, who won back-to-back even before. A little bit of an aging core for them. There was a situation. They were 29th. There's a situation where it was either pay Sidney Crosby's friends or he'll get pissed off. And we see that as a matter of they're going to have to really go scorched earth as soon as those contracts are up, and they're in the middle of a negotiation with Crosby right now for his next deal. In the case of the Lightning, they've lost a little bit. Obviously, they lost Stamkos this offseason. They paid some of their debt. Anthony Cirelli, Chernak, Sergachev, even though he got traded. They undid a mistake of trading away Ryan McDonough and brought him back. Real big part of their identity when they did win. In the case of Colorado, you can't predict an injury to Gabriel Landeskog, who hasn't played since winning the Cup. And then obviously the off-the-ice issues with Valeri Nichushkin. But still, they were able to still make a trade for, even though they had a surplus of defensemen, they still wanted to get some help with their forward depth and trading one of their D in Bowen Byram and bringing in Casey Middlestat, who was not in the best situation in Buffalo, too. So those recent Stanley Cup champions have been able to always pivot, too. And same thing with Vegas. Older guy in Riley Smith, they were able to move on from. Jonathan Marchessault, he was part of the guys who, unfortunately, even though he won the Conn Smythe, it was better for them long term that they didn't give him a big deal, which we'll discuss a little bit of Jonathan Marchessault in the third segment too, in the Carter Verhaeghe segment. But these GMs have always been able to pivot too. And for the Panthers in their situation, looking at this front office ranking and seeing these recent champions, I believe there's a little bit of a blueprint that Bill Zito could definitely follow. And talk about the 8-year deals. Everyone who's an 8-year deal has been a guy who's proven it for the Panthers too. And it's going to be a continuation of 1-year prove it guys in the next few years as things will start to open up in 3 years from now.
Yeah, and I have to say it was a really interesting article that Dom wrote. He and I are usually on opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to opinions, but no, it's just good to see the Panthers get their roses and everything because if I remembered last year, they were ranked 7th. And I think it was with the idea from the public that, well, this was a fluke run and they can't do it again. Well, here we are, 1 cup later. And you have to really understand kind of how Bill Zito came in, operated, and then basically took control of this organization and made the moves that he had to put the team over the top. I mean, we've talked ad nauseum about the Tkachuk trade for Huberdeau, which, I don't know if a lot of GMs would have done that at that point. They probably consider it too risky, along with giving up Weegar and a first and Schwint. But you need to take risks like that in order to prove your team, or at least change, what the culture and the identity in the room. But after winning a cup, you had all the pieces, you had everything there to put you over the top. But then the idea is, how do you get there again? How do you manufacture almost the same thing or something similar to what you had? And it is a very tough thing because not only are you trying to rebuild and do that, other teams are trying to catch you and are getting closer because let's face it, Panthers lost some talent this offseason, not as much as some would think. I mean, I hated losing Stenlund, I hated losing Ryan Lomberg, amongst others. But to say that Bill Zito didn't have a good offseason, I thought he had a fantastic offseason replacing those guys. So it's really finding those guys who can come in, fit in with the group, and not really change too much and really understand what the overall goal is. And, can we say Vegas did the same thing this past offseason? Or did they let things hang over them, like the Marchessault contract, getting rid of Riley Smith? I mean, did they take too much off of their team that, really affected them? And, Colorado, again, you said, they had off ice issues and they've had a couple of other things going on. Florida can't have that if they want to repeat, and they have to stay healthy and they have to have everybody buy in. So, long story short, it's well deserved, but the proof is going to be in the pudding, I guess, come next season when we see how this team starts out and hopefully makes another run at it.
Yeah, and some decisions are made and writings are on the wall based on who you paid before and what other moves you made. I mean, when the Vegas Golden Knights traded for Tomas Hertl, that was probably the writing on the wall for Jonathan Marchessault. Same thing with signing Gustav Forsling. That was the writing on the wall for Brandon Montour a little bit there. And even for maybe we see the contract that was offered to Steven Stamkos this year from Julian Breezewell, which was 3 times 10. could we see that very same situation for the likes of Aaron Ekblad next offseason too? And it's about really the front office and being honest with themselves and knowing that you gotta pay guys for what they're going to do and not for what they're past. And that's really the situation that a lot of these GMs, when they do win a Stanley Cup, is like, do you just are you trying to keep it for the feelings and the vibes, or are you looking at what's to come and are you satisfied with just one? Not saying that everyone exactly operates like that, but sometimes feelings of winning can really take over into just rushing to get someone there, which thankfully for the Panthers and signing Sam Reinhart, it was still fair value for him and the team. So that thankfully they were able to get that after winning. It wasn't like 11 or 12 million for them. But the Panthers obviously in the pursuit of repeat, but two of their superstars actually discussed more about being greedy for more. Not only are the Barkov and Tkachuk discuss more about wanting more, but they're chasing more than just another Stanley Cup. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And I'd like to thank you guys once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure you enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Barkov and Tkachuk discuss more about being greedy, about wanting to win more. And here are some of the quotes. Matthew Tkachuk saying, "quote I'm almost greedier. I want it more. I want this feeling again." And that close quote. And then Barkov saying, "quote I want to feel the same feelings again. That leaves you hungry." Close quote. And it's so crazy whenever you think about athletes winning, guys we look up to. And sometimes the first question that even media members and sometimes even me, I'm guilty of thinking this of wanting to ask them what's next. But you get to that mountaintop and then you realize that you still have to start over every single time when you're going into a new season. Obviously, there's goals on and off the ice, obviously, with Barkov. I wouldn't be surprised if he's ever in a management role of some type, even because of the business that he has back in Finland in Tampere for the club that he and his dad are involved in. But there's more than just cups, legacy, and points for in the NHL for Barkov and even Selke trophies for him. But I think of like where he ranks in regard to all-time greats in Finnish hockey players. For example, like the likes of Olli Jokinen and Saku Koivu, he's going to pass them in the next two seasons. So really the only guys that he's going to be behind is going to be the likes of Teemu Selanne and Jari Kurri. But I also wanted to relate this because of the Olympics that are currently going on, the Summer Olympics, that I've just been around a TV all day watching them too. And even the primetime shows with Mike Tirico, I've been watching a lot of it. And just it gets me excited for the Winter Olympics coming in 2026 in Italy. But Barkov has an opportunity to have a trifecta of some of the all-time greats. Captain of a Stanley Cup team, captain of the Finnish team, which Saku Koivu had. But the guys like Selanne and Kurri participated in multiple Olympics. In the case of Kurri, He participated in the Olympics when he was part of the WHA, but when he was in the NHL, he didn't get to go back again until the NHL finally went to the Olympics in '98. Teemu Selanne had that opportunity multiple times, 4 Olympics to be exact. Barkov has been robbed of a few times. He's been already once in 2014 and an opportunity to go again too. Points, he'll probably finish third all time for him. But that opportunity for him to get to have those 3 things on his resume, captain of a team, captain of national team in the Olympics, and then possibly gold, that is something really special for someone. And with the reception that he already had, the fact that it was live stream, obviously, and for us here in the US, I just think it's a great opportunity. In the case of Matthew Tkachuk, if he were at his point pace right now for what he is for 6 more seasons on his contract, plus more because he's going to be 30 by the time he goes into his next contract, he'll be just at 1,100 points, which will make him in the top 10 by the time his current contract is up. So there's more than just Stanley Cups and for on the line for both of these 2 great players.
So when you brought up the fact that he'll be the captain, obviously of a Stanley Cup winning team, he'll be the captain of the Finnish national team going to the Olympics in 2026, and then thirdly, he sounds like Sidney Crosby to me. And who would have thought that he would have had similar accomplishments as Sidney Crosby, because he was heralded as the next one to usher in the new fans and the new league and everything. And people didn't know. And people thought that, Dale Talon, made a mistake in drafting him at number 2, that they needed a defenseman. So, Barkov is the real deal. And he could, with a gold medal, actually probably become, if not the best, probably top 2 Finnish players of all time, and he's still under 30. It's ridiculous. With all those names, like you're saying, Curry, Selanne. I think of all the players in the '90s that I watched. Just the transition from going to Europe to the United States and the NHL. It's fascinating to see. But going on Matthew Tkachuk, he's already surpassed his dad. Who should be in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion. But I think Matthew now just wants to add more hardware. Whether it's a Stanley Cup, he wants to be top in scoring of all Americans, everything. He has a chance to being roughly top 5, top 10 at the end of his career in American skaters. So Stanley Cup is a part of it. It's a big part of it. But it's what you do with the other chances that you have that can really, really make the difference in who's good and who's great.
Mm-hmm. And just with his Panthers, his current contract ending and being at that 1,100 points, these are the following players that he would be in company with: Pat LaFontaine, Brian Leetch, his dad Keith Tkachuk, and Joe Pavelski, who just recently retired. There's a little bit of, obviously we've seen Joe Pavelski recently, so the fact that obviously Joe Pavelski being a late round pick and getting to this part of his career, even though he didn't win a cup, and then possibly 8 more years after that, he's going to finish in the top 5, possibly in the top 5 of all American skaters. I mean, we speak about Captain America Patrick Kane too with his resume. So I mean, with Patrick Kane has an opportunity to go to 1 more Olympics. Barkov maybe has 2, depending on his contract does end in 2030. He'll be in his late 30s, so we don't know. Matthew, man, he could possibly have 3, depending on if the Olympics, if the NHL decides to go back for beyond 2030, because they're right now committed to the next 2. So we got to see where it goes from there, and it's really a great opportunity for these 2 about just being greedy, and also the chances of getting on the international stage, which I do want to park this conversation and go. And next week I want to discuss more about other players who might have a chance to make the international teams for the Olympics. But we have a lot of off season to discuss that with that and all. But with being greedy, wanting to win, front office confidence, it gives us an opportunity to discuss where another Panthers player and their company is as far as goal scoring in as they are in the pursuit of a new contract. Yes, that's right. We're going to talk more about where Carter Verhaeghe is in the goal scoring department and where the echelon that he is in compared to other guys who are ahead or behind him and where they are getting paid. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs have completed, we have fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets us keep the sports going whenever we want. And all we have to do is open up the app and dream up big anytime we are in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Third and final segment here on this Friday, August 9th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Friday, a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. And Nick, once again, this is going to continue. We are going to continue the conversation of Carter Verhaeghe and our desire. I guess we could call it a desire of Bill Zito, of us really wanting Bill Zito to pay this man, and just the story of where Carter Verhaeghe has been to being passed up in the draft multiple times by multiple teams, eventually getting drafted by the Toronto Maple Leafs, then going to Tampa Bay, leading the AHL in goals, being part of a Stanley Cup winning team in Tampa Bay as far as a depth piece there, not being qualified an offer there. Panthers pick him up, and it's history from there. Obviously, the first season being right on that Barkov line, and then they just mixed so well since then. Obviously, has jumped up and down between the top line and the second line. Obviously, him and Bennett and Tkachuk have had some time together, but I just decided to look up where he ranks as far as goals since he joined the Panthers in 2021. And he hadn't really broken out until the very next season. But he's number 30 in the NHL since the 2021 season. So almost 4 full seasons. Obviously 2021 was that 56 game season. That puts him in the top 8th percentile of forwards in the NHL in that span. And and in that list, Nick, he is above guys like Mark Scheifele, Artemi Panarin, who just had a 50-goal season, Elias Pettersson, John Tavares, Brad Marchand. There's guys who are ahead of him who can't be surprised that are like Alex DeBrincat, Jason Robertson, Nathan McKinnon, Reinhart, McDavid, Matthews, Draisaitl. Those guys. I'm not going to name all 30, but but there's a few guys who are a few of them who are paid a little bit more of them than him. Jonathan Marchessault is one of them. Brock Nelson's another. But I also think about for Carter Verhaeghe, this isn't a situation where you're looking for a guy to prove himself too, which is the great thing about this for Bill Zito. We've seen what he's already done, capable of scoring 40. But just like the Reinhart extension that we saw, even if 57 is an outlier and things regress to the mean, there's opportunities for other guys like a Tkachuk to possibly go back to 40 goals this year. And even Verhaeghe too. We saw that in 2023. And obviously that really helped the Panthers too in that season as well. Obviously changing game, less shots, more defensive minded, opportunistic. I get that. But when you have 4 guys, which even though Barkov statistically has never scored 40 in his career, we know he can. Mm-hmm. That is something that you want to solidify on your team, at least for the next 6 years, because as far as years left there for Barkov and Tkachuk, 6, 8 for Reinhart, and then what I guess if Verhaeghe is going to get a new deal, we're going to guess it's going to be the term of 8. That's at least the desire there. But just when you think about locking up guys, and for Verhaeghe, 8, 9.5, somewhere around that range, you see that echelon of guys who are around that. And it's about, really, we know that he's going to get the bag. But now that we see the company that he's in, and let's also include the postseason success, the 5 overtime winners too, clutch as can be, and getting a guy under that number and seeing the company that he's in, I mean, it only makes sense for it to happen.
You stole my line there with Captain Clutch. You don't find those players very often. He's been a huge boost to this organization since coming in. His first contract with the Panthers was 2 years, $2 million, and then quickly signed an extension right after that for 3 more years at 4.16. And now, within that extension, he's gone up to 40 goals and has scored some crucial franchise-altering goals. I mean, my favorite goal of his of all time right now is still that Boston Game 7 goal. Close second for me is going to be the Capitals series clincher as well, because that to me finally got the Panthers off into the right direction. But he plays the game very well. I mean, yeah, he takes a lot of these in the offensive zone. He's kind of loose with his stick, but you can't teach what he brings to the game. And I think what Florida has provided him, not only a more playing time, but also playing on the top 2 lines. As Reinhart said, who doesn't want to play with Barkov? Everybody's at the top of their game, or they benefit from playing with him. It's going to be interesting to see what Bill is going to be able to sign him towards, because I'll be honest, I'm at probably about a 95%, confidence rating that he's going to re-sign with Florida. But, there's that 5% chance where, things could go differently, and maybe he really does want the bag, and there's a team out there that will pay him 11.
Yeah.
Which would be scary. But but you gotta take care of the guys that take care of you, and he's still young enough, and he's still a part of this core that I think could take the Panthers on to a repeat Stanley Cup if it is possible.
And you also got to think about him just being able to shoot from distance. They have their net front guys in Tkachuk and Reinhart, though, and it brings that balance when you have a guy who has one of the best wristers in the entire league too, and for that, and who could get it to the far side too with a screener in front. And for Verhaeghe, his last extension was a year before his contract expired. Currently has 1 year left for him at this moment in time for him too. So for Verhaeghe, it's hope. It's the hope. And I did a little bit of a calculation of what the salary cap would be if you increased it by $4 million again. Not saying it's going to be exactly that number. That would leave $27 million in cap space for 9 players left for the Panthers. If you were to pay Verhaeghe 8.5, that would leave the Panthers around 19 million to pay 8 more guys. It's crazy because this time when we were reviewing this in around the trade deadline last season, that average number was around 2 million per guy. I'm like, okay, 1 million more. If you average it out after the fact, you pay for Verhaeghe. So a little bit of more breathing room for the Panthers coming in. You got Lundell taken care of. You don't need and the Mackie Samoskevich isn't gonna provide a huge extension, at least in my opinion, at this point in time. So I think it's really an opportunity it's not, even if you want to reload and you let Sam Bennett and Aaron Ekblad walk, you have an opportunity to not go as much for league minimum guys and maybe bolster up a little bit. Obviously, the defense is going to be a big question mark going into next season on whether they trade for a defenseman under contract too, and maybe add a sweetener into that for cap space related reasons. If they want to put like an Eetu Luostarinen in the mix, even though you would sacrifice a little bit of defense, but you are using that money to pay for Verhaeghe and still and switch it to someone who for a new partner, possibly for Gustav Forsling there, if you don't like what you see on the open market on the defense too, for the Panthers too. So that's another thing, something that I think of for how Bill Zito is just going to maneuver this if they are going to in fact pay for Verhaeghe.
So 2 things on that. Bill Zito multiple times has said that he's looking to get everybody signed to keep everybody, although we know the logic and the math does not add that up unless people want to take massive discounts to stay here. I'm talking about Aaron Ekblad possibly taking a huge discount to stay here in Florida. And the other thing, too, I wanted to bring up about Verhaeghe is he could have had 40 goals this season. I remember there was a stretch where he had goals taken off the score sheet.
Like 3 of them, right? Barkov did?
And Barkov took him. He would have been so close to 40, which would have then upped the AAV just a little bit more. So Barkov just keeps giving the Panthers opportunities. But no, Carter's going to earn every cent on his next contract. I hope it's with Florida. I'm confident that's going to be. But, with Bill Zito and the management group right now, they have a lot of decisions to make. They have a lot of moving parts. Thankfully, they are a fluid group, so they know what they're looking for and what they want to bring in. So I have a feeling that if they do sign Verhaeghe early in this season, depending on it, if they want to do negotiations during the season, that they'll have a pretty good idea later in the season or even in the next offseason of what they're going to do in order to keep the team competitive going forward.
Yeah, and if there's no extension for Carter Verhaeghe before opening night, I believe we'll see it. I believe we could possibly see it at the trade deadline. So it's not going to be a panic situation, honestly, regardless of even if you don't get either of them. Just let it play out and see where the chips fall for him, because obviously you got to get a projection first, and obviously we'll know there's going to be a press conference from Gary Bettman that's going to say an official announcement of what the cap is going to be, but there's going to be multiple reports going out right before even Gary Bettman gets in front of the media and announces the actual number too. So we will definitely go based on those projections and see where it makes sense from there. But nothing to panic if it doesn't in fact happen prior to game 1. But Nick, I want to thank you so much once again for joining me on another edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, another successful Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. Thank you once again for joining me, my friend, and tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Thank you for having me on, Armando. I'm glad we could have a healthy episode this time. I know I was on the IR and then you had the sniffles last week, so glad you're feeling better. But you guys can follow me on X at Prudentious0. Can't wait for the season to get started. I'm starting to get fever now. I mean, I need stuff to start popping off now. I need hockey back in my life.
By the time this episode drops, we will be 60 days from opening night. Chris Drieger days from opening night, and Jose Theodore. So
nice.
So hockey will be coming soon. So thank you so much, my friend, and I will see you next time.
I'll see you next time.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Nich Fairbanks, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.